Imagine a fund created to lift an entire nation out of poverty. A government-backed investment vehicle worth billions of dollars, designed to build schools, hospitals, and infrastructure for the people of Malaysia. Now imagine that money, every last dollar of it, quietly disappearing into private bank accounts, luxury yachts, Picasso paintings, and a Hollywood blockbuster about greed. This is not fiction. This is the largest financial scandal in modern history, and for years, almost nobody noticed. Over $6 billion vanished. A sitting prime minister was implicated. A Hollywood studio produced a film celebrating excess with stolen money. A superyacht longer than a football field was purchased in cash. And the man at the center of it all lived so lavishly that investigators initially thought the numbers were a typo. How does $6 billion simply disappear? And who had the audacity and the connections to pull it off? The story of 1MDB begins in Malaysia in 2009, when Prime Minister Najib Razak launched a state investment fund called One Malaysia Development Berhad. The pitch was inspiring. Malaysia would invest in infrastructure, energy, and real estate. The profits would flow back to the Malaysian people. The fund would put a developing nation on the map as a financial powerhouse. What actually happened would take years to unravel, and when investigators finally cracked the surface, what they found beneath it would shock every financial institution on the planet. This is not just a story about corruption. It is a story about how money moves through the invisible cracks of the global financial system, how power shields the guilty, and how one man turned a nation's trust into his personal piggy bank. But to understand where the money went, you first need to understand the man who knew exactly how to move it. The man with a phone and a dream. His name was Joe Low, not a politician, not a banker. A 27-year-old Malaysian socialite with an extraordinary gift for making powerful people feel important. While most young men his age were building careers, Joe Low was hosting private parties for celebrities in Las Vegas, flying friends on private jets, and spending more in a single night than most people earn in a decade. People assumed he came from old money. He let them believe it. The truth was that Joe Low had identified something most people miss entirely, that access is more valuable than money. And that if you make powerful people feel connected to wealth, they will open doors that no amount of money could otherwise buy. He cultivated relationships with royalty, ministers, and financiers. And when 1MDB was launched, Joe Low positioned himself as the invisible hand guiding its investments. He had no official title, no government role. He was simply always there. That ambiguity would become his greatest weapon. The architecture of disappearance. The mechanics of what followed were staggering in their complexity and breathtaking in their audacity. Money flowed from 1MDB through a labyrinth of shell companies registered across the British Virgin Islands, the Cayman Islands, and Singapore. It moved through fake joint ventures, inflated bond deals, and fraudulent investment agreements. Each layer of paperwork made the money look legitimate. Each transfer moved it further from its origin. Goldman Sachs raised over $6 billion for 1MDB through bond sales, collecting fees so large that even internal analysts raised eyebrows. The bank collected approximately $600 million in fees, roughly 10 times the industry standard. When junior employees flagged concerns, those concerns disappeared quietly into the institutional silence that protects powerful clients. By the time regulators in Switzerland and Singapore began noticing suspicious transactions, billions were already gone. And they had traveled somewhere nobody expected. The wolf, the yacht, and the Wolf of Wall Street. In 2013, a Hollywood film began production. The Wolf of Wall Street, Martin Scorsese's darkly comedic portrait of financial fraud, was bankrolled in part with funds that had been siphoned from 1MDB. The irony was almost unbearable. A film about stolen money, made with stolen money. Red Granite Pictures, the production company behind the film, received funding linked directly to accounts connected to Joe Low. Celebrities were flown to parties. Private concerts were arranged. Leonardo DiCaprio received a Picasso and a Jean-Michel Basquiat painting as gifts, a $35 million jet, a $250,000 Dior watch. None of them, investigators would later conclude, knew where the money came from. While the film celebrated the madness of financial excess on screen, the real excess was happening behind the camera. And then there was the yacht, the Equanimity. 300 feet long, a helicopter pad, a swimming pool, a cinema room, and a crew of 30. Purchased for $250 million in cash and registered under a shell company. It drifted between international waters for years as investigators tried to determine who actually owned it. It was, in many ways, the perfect metaphor for the entire scandal: massive, beautiful, and built on water. In 2015, the Wall Street Journal published a bombshell investigation revealing that nearly $700 million had flowed directly into the personal bank accounts of Prime Minister Najib Razak himself. $700 million. Into one man's personal account. Najib denied everything. Called it a political conspiracy. Claimed the money was a donation from a Saudi royal family. But investigators across multiple countries, the United States, Switzerland, Singapore, Australia, were all arriving at the same conclusion simultaneously. The U.S. Department of Justice launched the largest kleptocracy asset seizure in American history. Properties across Beverly Hills, New York, and London were frozen. The Equanimity was intercepted off the coast of Bali by Indonesian authorities. In 2020, Najib Razak was convicted on all 7 charges against him: abuse of power, criminal breach of trust, and money laundering. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison. Jeho Lo has never been captured. He remains a fugitive, believed to be living somewhere in China, beyond the reach of international extradition. The 1MDB scandal did not happen in the shadows. It happened in plain sight at film premieres, on superyachts, inside the boardrooms of some of the most prestigious financial institutions in the world. The people who enabled it were not monsters hiding in dark rooms. They were bankers, lawyers, politicians, and executives who chose to look the other way because the money was extraordinary and the consequences felt distant. One of the most sophisticated financial systems ever built by humanity was used not to lift people out of poverty, but to fund a lifestyle so excessive it nearly defied reality. And the people it was supposed to help, the citizens of Malaysia, were left with a debt they are still repaying today. The money is mostly gone. Joe Lo is still free, and somewhere out there, the system that allowed it to happen remains almost entirely intact.